This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter for MacVoices viewers and listeners. Visit MacVoices.com, look for the blue box in our sidebar, and subscribe. Welcome back to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, a few weeks ago, I was in Las Vegas for the Star Trek convention, and that's a whole nother story. But while I was walking on the exhibit floor, I ran into a gentleman selling an iPhone and iPad app that was the Vulcan Harp, Mr. Spock's instrument from Star Trek. And it was very interesting. We had a great conversation, and so I invited him to be on the show, talk about the Vulcan Harp, of course, and some of the other software he has. So, from Shiverware, Mr. David Gerhard. David, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
It's good to talk to you again, too.
Yeah, it was fun. I really didn't go to the convention expecting to run into anyone that would be interview-worthy, so therefore I didn't take any gear. And I ran into several people, so the audience will hear from some of those later, but I really was anxious to talk to you about this in a little more detail than we had a chance to there. The Vulcan Harp, I think it's fascinating that you created an instrument for real that can be played on an iPad that was not real in physicality.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, actually, when we're thinking about developing a musical instrument. If you're basing it on something that exists in sort of a franchise where there's a lot of people who are really excited about it, they're really sort of attention to detail is a big deal, right? So we went back and we looked at the shows and we watched every time that it appeared in the shows, and it was different every time. And so it was really odd to try to sort of make an instrument that had some, that could actually be played and actually made noise and stuff. But it was, because it was different every time, we could sort of take some liberties and make something that was more like a musical instrument that you could play and less like a prop that somebody would sort of have on their shelf instead.
Okay, there's a piece of Star Trek trivia. I did not know that the Vulcan Harp was different every time.
It is, yeah. I mean, I guess in the show they wanted to make it clear that it was a diverse instrument that you could do a lot of stuff with. But I just think the sound designers had a lot of fun with it when they had the chance to do something that was different than science fiction-y beeps and boops, right? They could make something that's kind of sympathetic in a way.
Interesting phrase. So tell us a little bit about the harp, because I'm not a musician, as the listeners well know, and so I'm going to let you go into musical jargon that the musicians out there will understand as far as how this can be played, what notes it can be played, because you were telling me some of it, and I understood part of it.
So when we decided to make this app, we wanted to make an instrument that was like actually playable, like a real instrument. And so we did a lot of research on harps and how they work. And we chose a special scale called a pentatonic scale, which has just a small collection of notes. It's not all the notes from the scale. It's 5 of them, pentatonic. And we chose that because musically, if you play any 2 notes from the pentatonic scale, they will sound nice together. That's the way that the scale sets up. And that's why a lot of sort of old societies, pentatonic music is very common, because it's some of the first music that is evolutionarily found or something. Anyway, so we made the pentatonic scale, but then that limits the number of notes you can play. So we made also a little dial that let you choose which pentatonic scale you're playing. So you can play in different keys and play with different notes. The other thing we did was we wanted to make it as much like an actual harp as we could, so that we could then repurpose it later if we wanted to make like a harp app or something. So we talked to harpists that we knew here in town, and we made it so that the strings were colored in the same way that harp strings are colored. We also spent a lot of time on the string dynamics, so that it's not just like touch and it makes a noise. We wanted to be able to have it like feel like you're kind of plucking it, which is weird on a touch screen. There's no feel at all. But when you put your finger down and sort of drag, the string will come along with you. And then when you go a little too far, the string will tighten up and make the noise and pluck and sort of vibrate. And so we spent a long time working on this, which was an interesting decision because probably nobody will notice. But it's one of those design decisions you make, right? That you want to make it nice, you want to make it right, so that, for that 5% of whatever who are really, really into this stuff and will pay attention to this, they'll say, yeah, this is great because whatever, right?
And I mean, I think that's what sets iOS app developers apart. you will know it's not right. You will notice that, so you want to make it right.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, we wouldn't feel good making an app. I mean, our company, one of the things we say we're good at is, user experience, user interface design. We list that as one of our sort of big deals. And so to make an app like this, it could have been just like, take a Google search photograph of this harp and draw some lines on it, and that would be done. But we wanted to go a little bit further and make it a little bit nice.
How about the actual sound that the harp makes? Did you sample a real harp, or did you make some modifications to a real harp sound?
We used sound fonts in this app, actually, which is kind of a neat idea. You can get these fonts, which are collections of sounds, and then you can trigger them with a MIDI message. And basically what it'll do is it'll pick one of the sounds that it has recordings for, and then shift it up or down to match the pitch that you're playing. And so we experimented with a bunch of different sound fonts, and we picked a couple ones that are all weird science fiction-y, spacey kind of stuff. The one that people like the most is actually the banjo, which is odd, we thought. But when you think about it, I mean, it's a plucking thing, and it's got a little bit more sort of presence and depth than a harp, because the harp is very thin, very fine as a sound. And so if you're playing it by yourself, it's fine. But when you play it in a collection of other instruments or on a really loud convention floor, like when you saw it at the Star Trek convention, it doesn't really sort of stand out. So the banjo is the sound that most people like. We don't call it a banjo. We have actually little icons on the little selector so that you can sort of associate the icons with whatever you feel like the sound sounds like. So I want to choose the lightning bolt sound next, or maybe the little star sound. And that way people can build their own mental models of what the sounds sound like for them.
So does this mean that there's an opportunity to load more sound fonts in? And of course, naturally, I'm thinking about like typographic fonts that we can load into our systems. Can you load more sound fonts into the harp?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that from the developer side. We can add new sound fonts very easily. We don't have that functionality built in for you as a user to download a sound font and drop it in, although that's a neat idea. And it's probably, I mean, sound fonts, they're not new, but more and more developers are starting to use them. And so we may see some sort of inter-app operability of, choosing sound fonts from one and letting them work in another. I'm hoping that's a feature that'll come about.
So this is something new to me. So theoretically, I could have my Vulcan harp sound like a keyboard?
Yeah, you could have it sound like anything you want. That's the neat thing about musical instruments, musical apps in general, is that they work together nicely. They're really divided into two categories. You have your controllers, and then you have your synthesizers. And so we have another app on the store called Musix, which is mostly a controller. It's got some sounds on it, but they're not very good. What people do with it mostly is they use it as a controller for other apps, which are primarily synthesizers. And they use background inter-app operability, basically MIDI, which is a musical instrument protocol. So you play a note in one app, the other app responds and makes that sound. And so you could do the same thing. We don't have this functionality set up in the harp, but you could do this with the harp, as you could pluck a note on the harp and have another app make the noise, and then you could have it sound like literally anything you wanted to.
Before we leave the harp, because I do want to get to Musix and get into a little more detail there, talk a little bit about the licensing process. That's one thing that I know with Star Trek they guard very carefully, and there are a lot of fans out there that get very enthusiastic about doing Star Trek projects. How did you go about getting the licensing for this?
Yeah, that was easily half of the work of getting the app out there. The idea for us actually came from a third party. There was a person in the local community who wanted to make an app that was a harp, but she wasn't a developer. She found out about us somehow. She contacted us, knew that we made musical instrument apps, and said, I want to do this. And we were like, well, this looks like it couldn't be too hard to develop. It looks like it might be kind of fun. So we decided to give it a try. She also said that she had some contacts in the industry. So she knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. And that was the next step. So we built the app on spec, basically. We built it just cuz. And then we started to try to get it into the hands of somebody at CBS Interactive. Those are the people who own the resources, the Star Trek brand name in interactive and video games and stuff like that. So she knew a guy who knew a guy. We sent messages and nothing happened. And then eventually, at some point, somehow, the person that we had a connection to in CBS Interactive got a hold of the app, they picked up one of our promo codes that we had sent them, and they looked at it and they said, "This is great, let's do it." And so as soon as they saw it, they were like, "Yeah, this is going to be a thing we'll do." But getting your foot in the door is the challenge, because they get inundated with licensing requests constantly, I'm sure, because everybody wants to, once you get so if you build an app like this, if you got two basic choices, you can either say it's the official Star Trek whatever, and then that vastly increases your marketability. It vastly increases the amount of pie that you can get, but your slice of the pie gets smaller because CBS Interactive is going to take a cut of whatever you make on that app. The other option is to call it the Star Voyage app, or find some clever way to get around the trademark issue. But then you don't have the search terms, right? People who are in the App Store looking for Star Trek apps are going to search for Star Trek. They're not going to search for whatever you happen to choose that is close enough to Star Trek to be identifiable, but not close enough to be infringing. So that was a good question. We knew that we wanted to get it to be officially licensed, and so we went through this whole process. But yeah, the CBS Interactive takes a significant cut of the profits, so that influences the decision anyway, at least.
Did it influence the decision on pricing? Because I was frankly surprised at this sophisticated a musical instrument app that you have it priced, as with so many, rather affordably.
Yeah, well, this is a really tough decision to make, because the App Store pricing model has really sort of pushed everything down to the lowest common denominator, and even making it cost money at all was a big decision, because there's a lot of people for whom if you say it's free, then people will get it. And if you say it costs $1, no, $1 is way too much. We had somebody at the con that would come up and saw the app and said it was great, we love it, we're going to get it. And then we said, oh yeah, it's on sale, it's only $1. And they're like, $1? That's far too much. Are you kidding me with $1? But this is the mentality that's in the App Store now, is that things that cost money are automatically too expensive by nature. And so this pushes the freemium model, the in-app purchase model, and we can go that route. We were thinking about going that route, making the app free, and then you had to buy extra instruments, or you had to buy extra scales or features or whatever. But that from a consumer perspective, that's annoying, because then you don't get the complete experience and you have to sort of piecemeal it. From the developer's perspective, it's the way to get it into the hands of the most people. But we wanted to give like a complete app, and it's not much money, and as a consequence, we're not making a lot of money on it. We'd have to sell it to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people if we were going to make money on it. So it's mostly been an interesting experiment, a great brand recognition tool. A lot of people know about us now that didn't know about us before. A lot of media, a lot of marketing, but in terms of putting food on the plate, not as much as we were hoping.
Yeah, I can understand that. Now, you mentioned that it was on sale during the convention, of course. What's the regular price on it?
Regular price, we went back and forth on it. I think we started at $3, but we've been sort of leveling it off at $2. It's about, where you can set the price where enough people will impulse buy it to start to spread the word. And so it's $2 is the regular price now, which is sort of in the second tier of expensive for apps that are on the App Store. But it's cheap enough, and it's enough of a niche market item that people who are interested in it will buy it just because it's the Star Trek Vulcan Harp. And I mean, you were at the convention. You can see that there's people there that have a level of dedication that I just can't match, right? I mean, they're really into it, and they'll get what is there for Star Trek, which is great. I mean, it's that kind of it's really empowering and exciting to see people really, really passionate about the stuff they're interested in. So, I mean, yeah, setting the price was a challenge. We're doing a bunch of marketing now. We've got a contest now where you can compose a song on the harp and then submit it up to SoundCloud, and then people can vote on it, and that's building, bringing in some interest as well. But the biggest thing we got when we were at the con was, please, can we have it on Android? And that was a whole nother sort of decision-making process, is can we make it on Android? Well, no, not really. I mean, that's us partly because we're an iOS house almost exclusively. And, we've been thinking about either, getting enough Android chops to move it over to Android, or, hiring out some third party to develop it in Android. And it's expensive, and we're probably not going to make that money back in it. So it's a really tough proposition to say, yeah, let's put it out on Android. We may decide we'll make it free with in-app purchases and put it on Android. But the other thing about licensing, not to belabor the point, but the other thing about the licensing is that everything we do about the app has to be approved by CBS Interactive, because it's their property, and it makes sense. So when we put it on sale, we have to call them up and say, we want to put it on sale. Are you okay with that? Every marketing decision, every sort of, post that we post on a blog, we have to get vetted by the folks at CBS Interactive, because they want to make sure that they're maintaining their brand. And so it's a lot of administrative work, but it's really cool to be able to say we have the official Star Trek app, branded, recognized, etc.
Oh, sure. That's something that surprises me a little bit. I can completely understand some of that. I'm surprised that they would need to be involved in all the marketing, like the contest for SoundCloud. They apparently had to approve that, and I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, well, it's not that they want to do the marketing; it's that they want to make sure that everything that's associated with it is on message, that is connected to the message of whatever the Star Trek message is. So we were exploring alternative funding models for making the Android version, and we went back and forth on a few options, and the CBS Interactive decided not to allow us to pursue one of these alternative funding models, and they thought that it wouldn't mesh with the brand, or there would be legal issues or whatever, and stuff we never would even think about, right? But I mean, maintaining a multi-billion-dollar brand identity is a lot of work, and I'm not surprised at that. I don't begrudge them their decisions. It's more work for us because we have to maintain it, but it's cool to be part of it.
Yeah, no question. Well, I congratulate you because it's a cool app. I've played with it. Played with it because I'm not a musician, so it's fun just to pluck the strings a little bit and see what comes out. And I don't think I'll be uploading anything to SoundCloud, but still, I'm with you. I don't understand the whole pricing thing. It's on sale for $1. Well, in my mind, if you're interested in this, $5 is not too much. It's for what it is. So, and that judging by the dedication of some of the people at that con, there are people that are going to buy an iPad just so they can have this app.
I think there will be. That's right. There will be. And there were a number of people who were super excited about it. They got into it. They had this big smile on their face. They were playing it. And then they discovered it was iPad only. And I'm like, oh, well, we got Android, but maybe this is the reason to buy an iPad. Yeah. I don't know. I doubt that'll happen. But it is an interesting question because it brings up, again, the whole, things cost more to develop on Android. You get less money as a developer. The whole arguments that I'm sure you've had on your show a million times. It's a really interesting challenge as an Apple developer. Do you make the move to Android or do you stay where you are? It's a really good question.
Yeah. This edition of MacVoices could have been sponsored by you. MacVoices is always looking for sponsors who appreciate our high-signal, low-noise approach to tech topics with an Apple focus. Our sponsorship packages feature inclusion in all of the audio and video versions of MacVoices at all of their distribution points, a web presence, inclusion in the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and more. Get the details by contacting me at chuck@macvoices.com or contact Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Okay, so I want to make sure we get over to Musix Pro and talk a little bit about that. But first of all, seriously, folks, go and check out the Vulcan Harp. I think you're going to enjoy it. If nothing else, it's just a fun thing to play with and find out just how great a job that Dave and his crew did programming it. So,
thanks.
Musix Pro. You touched on that a minute ago, so I'm going to let you dig in deeper to that and what it is and how a musician would use it.
Yeah, so this is the app that really got us into developing in the first place. The group of us that are in Shiverware, I'm an academic. I teach at the university, and I study how people interact with music. And we've been playing around with some ideas about how people learn music, why the piano is hard to learn. It takes years and years and years to learn. And we looked at the arrangement of notes on a piano is in such a way that it makes sense physically, but not a lot of sense musically. So I won't go into the musical details, but we happened upon some interesting ideas that have been explored in the past but not into the detail that we wanted to. So the basic idea of Musix is we take the notes on a piano scale and rearrange them so that they are harmonically related. And so if you press two notes together, they are in tune. They're close together musically, not physically, right? Press two notes on a piano, they sort of cringe, they're dissonant. But if you press two notes together in Musix, they're in harmony. And so you can explore new ways of playing, and you can explore new musical relationships because of these arrangements. The notes are all on a hexagonal grid, and so you have like 3 dimensions of playing around with which notes to choose when. And there's lots of different ways to arrange these notes. Most of the apps that do this now choose one arrangement and stick with it, but we wanted to be able to investigate all of the different ways of rearranging notes harmonically. We published a few papers about these theories, but the app has been really an amazing tool for this because people play with it and they explore music in different ways. Kids learn how to play music faster on this. We hope. We haven't done the actual studies to prove that, but most of the kids who I see play with this, they explore things that you never would have imagined before. Composers are playing around with this, performers are playing around with this, and so it's really a neat new way to explore the harmonic relationships in music. We've had reasonable success with it. It's probably 2.5 years old now, and we've had something like 20 or 30,000 downloads, which means like a research topic like this, relatively esoteric, you'd never get 20 or 30,000 people excited about some sort of esoteric research topic. But because it's on the App Store and people can actually experiment with it, it opens it up to a whole new generation of people, which is really kind of exciting. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to play. It's colorful. It's neat. It's interactive. It's musical. It's definitely our flagship app, and it's $10 on the App Store. So we're not doing the whole get it out to as many people as we can, but the market for it is definitely a market that's interested in spending money on something good. So people who buy controllers spend tens of thousands of dollars on their rack of instruments. A $10 app for that is nothing. So it's a nice to be able to market to a premium market like that are willing to put the money in and get something back in exchange.
With something like this, because there's several virtual instruments out there that have no basis in the real world, do you teach people how to play this thing, or is it something that a musician would pick up with relative ease?
Well, for somebody who has a lot of experience with music, they'll start playing around with it and discover what these relationships are right away. But we do have a lot of videos online about how to use it. We have videos that show all the different features. We have videos that show people playing different notes, different instruments. One of the features that we have on our list of development requests is showing you, like if you wanted to play a particular melody, it would show you which notes are in that melody, and then you could sort of follow it along Guitar Hero-wise or whatever. So that's a thing we'd like to do. There's a bunch of other stuff we're doing right now instead of that, but we're hoping to do a new release of the app pretty soon, which will have some of these new features in it. So yeah, I mean, learning is definitely one of the reasons why the app exists. And it should be easier to learn this app than learning a piano. But getting you over that initial sort of exploration thing, the videos help, the tutorials help for sure, yeah.
So $10 in the App Store for Musix Pro. I know you have some other apps. Can you just take us a quick walk through some of those as to what they are? And
sure, yeah. I mean, we've done a bunch of little development projects, mostly for fun and to get experience making apps. We have a game that we're playing around with right now. We have a new developer who's coming in who's really good at Unity, and so we're exploring moving into Unity as a development engine in addition to Objective-C and Swift. We have an app, a little spoken metronome. This was a neat idea that somebody brought to us, where you have these metronomes that you play at the piano and it goes click, 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 click. The clicks don't help a lot if you don't know where you are in the bar, and so instead, music teacher would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, or like cheerleaders or choreographers are all day yelling a 5, 6, 7, 8, and so we wanted to have an app that would do that for them. And so we have an app that counts for you, just says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, there's a lot of back end stuff that's a little bit clever, using granular synthesis to make it sound like it's the same person speaking faster or slower. But I don't know if you know, people who have done this before know that if you just take a sound and speed it up, if it's a human voice, then it sounds like a chipmunk, and we didn't want to do that. So there's little tricks you can employ. So that's fun. We have a few little utilities on the App Store. A lot of little stuff. And the more of these little apps that sell, a few copies a day, then you can start to really build a business. But you need dozens of them if you want to have, a few apps that sell a few copies a day. What we really do, besides the forward-facing apps, is we have a fairly significant business on sort of independent private company calls us up and says we want an internal app to do a whatever, and we do a fair amount of that, and that is where we actually make enough to be viable. The apps in the App Store, it's a real challenge, because if you can find a few that are really popular and they can start to make money, that's great, but only a few people make enough money to really be successful in the App Store by itself. Most of us, just like a musician, you need something else on the side to make ends meet. And so for us, that's the internal development of private apps. And that's been doing well for us as well.
But I would imagine the public-facing apps are a great calling card. They're proofs of concept. They're proofs of your work. They're proofs.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that just there's a credibility factor that goes along with having 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 apps in the App Store, as opposed to saying, oh, yeah, we can build you an app.
Yeah, that's right. If a company ever wonders about whether we have the capabilities to do that, we send them to our public-facing apps. We also send them. We tell them about the other apps that we've developed for private companies, and we usually have reciprocal arrangements to say, can we use you as a reference for the next guy? And usually they're okay with that, because we're very careful to make sure that we develop, what they're asking for, but also to make sure that they understand user experience in a way that allows them to be a little bit flexible. If you're developing for a client, oftentimes they'll give you a big list of user requirements, and as a user experience person, you might look at those and say, well, these aren't really going to work this way. So if you maintain a good client relationship with the people you're developing for, then you can do stuff different from what they're asking, but still give them what they need, if that makes sense.
Last question, because I know you have to go. Why Shiverware?
Well, we're Canadian. We're up in Saskatchewan, Canada, which is just north of North Dakota, and it's cold up here a lot of the time. So shivering because of cold, but also shivering because we make cool stuff. So we like that double play on cool stuff, but also being cold in the middle of the winter.
People with unusual company names, there's always a story behind it. I like to make sure I get that out.
Sure.
The website where we send folks, and of course I'll have links in the show notes to all the apps specifically, but where do we send folks to learn more about everything?
Everything's on Shiverware.com, so all our apps are there. And if there's people that are interested in doing sort of commercial development, you can get to us there that way as well. I'm David at Shiverware.com, or there's Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff as well. But Shiverware.com is our main sort of front-facing website.
Great. David, it was a pleasure to meet you in Las Vegas. It's a pleasure to learn a little more about this, and hopefully we'll drive you some customers and get some people playing the Vulcan Harp.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your interest.
We'll do it again.
All right.
Folks, Shiverware.com, that's David. Go check it out, especially check out the Vulcan Harp, which is the thing that I'll be playing with when I have some free time again. Until the next time, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at CashFly.com.